Welcome back to Dobbeldans Cross Country Skiing podcast for another episode about 2023-2024 World Cup competitions. And this weekend we're in Trondheim, Norway for the last round before Christmas break. But it's also an official trial round for hosts of next year Nordic World Championships, just so skiers can test out the tracks, FIS can have a look at how everything is going around. Ski jumpers will also be there, although that will be in the latter part of the season to test out hills too. I'm not sure if Nordic Combined World Cup also visits Trondheim, but we have a very busy weekend with actually 3 competitions days to properly test out Granasen. Today it was freestyle sprint. It will follow tomorrow with skiathlon, and the weekend will round up with a 10k interval start in Classic on Sunday. But that's not the only cross-country skiing action in the upcoming days, as we have another double header in the Ski Classic series, this time in La Venosta Valley in Italy, after the kickoff in Bad Gastein last weekend. Another criterium style mass start on Saturday, and another time trial, although this time individual, not in teams, on Sunday. There will be a separate episode about events in Western South Tyrol. So if you're interested in that, make sure to subscribe to the channel. But for now, I'm gonna go back to Trondheim for the third sprint of the season. Unlike 2 previous ones, this one was in freestyle, not in classic, so we could have expected some changes in the pecking order in comparison to these first 2 sprints. I mean, not all of these athletes are created the same. Some of them prefer classic, some of them prefer freestyle. But first thing first, let's talk about briefly about the course. And the design was quite simple yet interesting. So we basically had 4 straights and 4 hairpins. It started with a first uphill. There were 2 uphills on the course. The first one was a bit on the shallower side. I mean, at the end, just before the first turn, it ramped up a bit, but it wasn't like super decisive. Then first hairpin, first downhill through a tunnel, up to second hairpin, out of which kicks up the second uphill, and it was like a stepped one. So it started quite steep, then it flattened out, and another ramp up to penultimate turn. Then the final descent, which was quite steep. Draft super important on this one, and also positioning. And then last hairpin and the quite short finish straight. So the course promised us quite dynamic races and a lot of tactical movements, because you really want to position yourself well with descent just before the finish, as moving up could be tricky, but staying in front could be even trickier. With that being said, we can jump straight into the results of qualifying runs, and that one was won once again by Linn Svan from Sweden. She won also the qualifying runs in Östersund for the last sprint last weekend. But what's interesting is the names that followed her closely. Jasmi Jenzu in second place, the one who won qualifying in Ruka, didn't perform that well in the heats. Then Victoria Karl in third, Maria Melling from Norway in fourth. So quite a lot of interesting names there, and you could ask yourself, where are your typical sprinters? Well, Emma Ribom, who's leading the sprint classification down in 14, 4 seconds, not 4, 6 seconds back to Linn, so that's quite a big gap. Just behind Moa Ilar, Jessie Diggins in yellow bib rounding up the top 10. And if you look for out-and-out sprinters, they are even further down. Kristine Shavos-Shistad in 21st. Good qualifying run for Maja Dahlqvist. Seems she's on the bit of an uprise in the form. Didn't really have too good of a start to the season. Quite terrible performance in Ruka, not so good in Östersund too. Frida Karlsson in 18th. But yeah, no spectacular omissions apart from maybe Anna Svensson. She was in 34th. But apart from that, yeah, everybody who should get in got into hits. On men's side, it was once again won by Kleibu, who after the mishaps in Ruka and some recovery week when he didn't compete in Gällivare, he went to Gala, is also just like in Östersund, P1 in qualifying. But just like with the women field, the winner is not surprising. What's surprising is people following him closely. Xiang Wang, he wasn't able to get through qualifying hits in Östersund. Here he is P2, great performance. Edwin Anger, quite promising result. He wasn't that good in previous competitions, and here he is at P4. But apart from that, yeah, nobody who should get in didn't get knocked out. Federico Pellegrino, not as good as he used to be in previous campaigns, but unlike in Östersund, he managed to get in at P22, and the last one to squeeze into top 30 to quarterfinals was Maciej Starenga for Poland, so that's a happy news for me. Finally, someone from my nation was able to get into top 30 this season. So with that positive news on more of a personal side, we can go straight to quarterfinals, and Emma Ribom, Christine Schistadt, this starts to become quite a common duo for the first quarterfinal of the sprint day. And they managed to get another 1-2 lockout. They exit straight from quarterfinal to semi-final. What's baffling me a bit about this one was the tactics of Yasmi Ensu. So yes, of course, she didn't know that when she was picking the quarterfinal for herself, she didn't know that Emma Ribom and also Christine Schistadt are gonna choose this one. So if she would know, she would probably not gonna go with this one. But once it was settled, my approach would be you're not gonna outsprint Ribom and Schistadt, so you should drive it from the start to give yourself best chance of getting out of quarterfinals on time. And she went to the front, but by the time she reached first uphill, she started looking around. Maybe someone will go to the front to change for me. And what ended up was a very slow quarterfinal, and quite understandably, because like Schistadt and Ribon won't gonna tow you to the finish. They want to spend as little energy as possible because they are very likely to end up in finals, and they can easily outsprint you. I mean, they are two of arguably top 3, top 4 sprinters at the moment. I mean, I'm not sure how to count Jona Zundling because she still seems not to recover from COVID. But okay, from the ones that are running, easily top 5. Maybe even some would say easily top 3 in the last finish straight finish. So if you can't win against them in a straight out sprint, you should make the run as fast as possible to make sure you can advance on time. And Yasmi didn't really do either, so yeah, she basically stopped at the first uphill, and then it was decided that it's not gonna be a fast quarterfinal. And Maribom actually approached the finish straight in quite a bad position, but good turning technique gave her a good exit on the final straight, and she won that one quite easily in front of Schistadt. Her the compatriot of Ribom Ilar in third. Yeah, no real chance with slow pace to exit from that one. The second quarterfinal, and here we had P1 from qualifying runs, Lin Svan. She won that quite easily, and that was quite fast paced for a long time. Melling and Quintin on P3 and P4 were able to hold on to lucky loser spots, and probably in some part due to changing of weather conditions. So while this run was going on, it started to snow a bit more. It was a light snow at the beginning. It started to intensify around this run, so the next hits were given a bit tougher conditions. We jumped to hit 3, and that was quite a promising result from Maya Dahlqvist. She was able to hold on quite well to the group and then finish it off with her trademark last 200-meter dash. Sofia Krell unfortunately took a tumble on the first downhill while exiting the tunnel, so we didn't really see what happened there. But yeah, the course very tight, so crashes were imminent. Then we have quarterfinal number 4. Now, just before the runs itself, this one definitely could have been expected to be a fast one, because Jessie Diggins always goes full guns blazing from the start to the finish, and that was probably the an opportunity that Frida Karlsson was looking after. Her strategy was basically to follow Jessie throughout the course, because she knew Jessie will go super hard from the start, and she was able to hold on to American and catch P2 spot to advance, eliminating in progress her compatriot Joanna Hagström. And the last quarterfinal, and that was actually the fastest one, with Victoria Karl driving the field from the start super hard, and actually conditions already managed to change by this point. It stopped snowing, and it produced a super fast quarterfinal with all of top 4 advancing, that being Victoria Karl, Julia Kern, Lotta Udnesveng, and Jasmin Kahara. So that's 5 quarterfinals of women's field. Then we have 5 quarterfinals for men. The first one with Kleibo and Shana Va, big favorites, was paced quite slowly, so the other competitors didn't really give themselves too much of a chance to advance from this one. Interestingly, I thought that with his very tactical approach, he wouldn't really get to front too early, and he actually head into the final downhill in front of everyone, but he kicked so hard off, was able to pass him on the downhill, and he finished it off with Shanava quite easily. Second quarterfinal, and that was even slower, and very tight fight for the final 2 spots between really all of the top 5. I mean, last Michal Novak was still quite close, but in the end it's Edwin Anger and Ansgar Evensen advancing from this one, so the young duo able to outperform a bit older Kalle Halvarsson and much older Federico Pellegrino. Then the third one, complete polar opposite, super fast one with Xiang Wang driving it from the start, the same approach as Jessie Diggins. I'm just gonna start 100%, and if you can stay, good luck staying with me. If you can, well, too bad. But not too many of them were able to stay with Xiang. By the time he hit the final downhill, there was quite a gap behind him, and Erik Valnes taking it way more easier, just finishing off in front of to his compatriots. And that one was for some time the best one, the fastest run. So it wasn't looking too bad for Paul Goldberg and Alexander Holmble, but the fourth quarterfinal was even faster, and there was more cooperation this one. So in quarterfinal 3, it was only really Xiang Wang who was driving the field. Here they rotated a bit more equally, and a tight finish between top 5 in the end. Taugbel and Jensen advancing automatically, but Amundsen and Hekström had really good chance of advancing on time. I mean, in the end, they did. And poor James Schoonmaker, who was able to snatch his first podium last weekend in Östersund, this time didn't even make it out of quarterfinals. And we're left with last quarterfinal, and this was definitely the weakest field, and I think the six athletes from this one, when they saw the time that was produced by the previous quarterfinal, were just, nah, we're not matching that, let's just fight for the top two, because there is no way we can make it out on time. And in the end, it's Kevin Bolger and Harald Astrup Arnesen. So we're done with quarterfinals, then we get to semifinals, and this is where it starts to get really interesting and tactical. So 3 Swedes in this one: Svan, Ribom and Dahlqvist against Schistadt, Fendrich and Kahara. And Christina started quite hard, but then let others to get to the front. She really didn't want to take the first spots early in the race, but Swedes really drove it on the uphill, on the second uphill, with Svan in front of Ribom. And Schistadt found herself only in 4th spot heading into the downhill. She was able to get quite easily past Nadine Fendrich, but it was too far of a starting position to actually be able for the Norwegian to pass the Swedes. Very tight finish, but Schistadt finishes in third behind Svan and Ribom. So Ribom and Svan were promised the final, and Schistadt could have been scared that she might not make it, especially given that initially this run was really slow paced. We'll get to that in a second. But just as this semi-final was ending, the snow started falling once again, and that, I think, had an impact on who was able to get out on time. So semi-final 2, and we have Jessie Diggins, who definitely was gonna make it super hard and super fast overrun, which was quite scary perspective for Schistadt. And by the time they reached the first uphill with Jessie in front, Frida was following her closely. They were almost 5 seconds up on the first quarterfinal. But then it's partly due to the snow and partly to the pacing. They started losing that advantage. Also on the plateau section of the second uphill, the pace wasn't hard. I mean, Jessie was driving it in her pace, but Frida behind her was actually like slow pulling, wasn't trying to increase the pace or anything. She thought that will be enough. By the time they reached the top of the second uphill, the advantage decreased from 5 seconds to 2 seconds roughly. I mean, that's just estimates. There aren't any proper intermediate checks, but Jessie was able to drive it from the start to the finish, but behind her carnage unfolded, with Victoria Kall being able to snatch P2 and Lotta Udnesveng just in front of Carlson. So 3:15.56 was able to end up in front of Nadine Fendrich, but not in front of Christine Schavos-Schistadt. So in the second part of the course, the first semi-final was able to make up over 5 seconds on the second semi-final. So that's a big difference. And that costs Frida Karlsson the advance to the final, because 3:13.7 is not enough. So with that, we know the squad of the women final. Now we have to determine the final for the men's field. In the first semi-final, we witnessed once again Xiang Wang applying the Jessie Diggins tactics of just going super hard from the start, although this time he was surpassed quite easily by Shanava and Kleibo on the latter part of the second uphill. This duo had quite an advantage over the rest, who battled into the last hairpin, like Ansgar Evensen, Xiang Wang and Edwin Anger went 3 wide into the last hairpin, super tight, not too much space for all of them there, and it resulted in Edwin Anger almost falling. His exit was super compromised, and he almost crashed into Johan Hegström. Exit of Xiang Wang was also quite compromised, so the main benefitor of this whole situation was Ansgar Evensen, who wasn't able to catch up to Lukas Shanava, so he had to count on second semi-final being even slower, but that was not the case, and once again quite a good cooperation among Norwegians. 5 Norwegians there and one sole Kevin Bolger, so quite unmatched on this aspect. And in the end, this semi-final was marginally faster, with Taugbel and Valnes advancing automatically and Amundsen and Jensen advancing on the time. In fact, Jensen had not even 1/10 of a second faster time than Evensen, so quite unlucky for Ansgar. Maybe he will be able to get into final in next sprint, which is in Toblach in the opening of Tour de Ski. We'll see about that after the Christmas break, but we now focus on the finals, and first with the women's final. And when you remember the semi-final of the first semi-final of women's field with Schistad, she wasn't able to outsprint Ribom and Svan, but that was mainly due to her positioning, I think. She started the last downhill in 4th. She had to go past Nadine Fenrich, and even still then she was able to come so close to Ribom and Svan that when I saw the sprinters field for the final of women's sprint, I thought to myself, well, Schistad if Schistad is at least third heading into the last hairpin, she is quite a good candidate to win in front of home crowd, and that's exactly what happened. So Swedes once again trying to light up the race on the uphill, putting Schistad a little bit of a backbone, completely dropping the rest of the field. Diggins gone, Karl gone, Wenck gone long way, but Schistad was able to hold on, and without needing to pass anyone like Nadine Fendrich, she had to pass Nadine Fendrich in semi-final. She was able to outpower Lynn Svan and Emma Ribom on the last stretch. I think in current form there is no way Lynn could win it, but Emma Ribom, she had quite a bad exit onto the final straight. She lost her balance momentarily, and that's probably where the race is lost for her. At the end she loses not only to Schistad but also to Lynn. Without that little problem, I think P2 would be guaranteed for Emma, and who knows, maybe even P1. But yeah, once again, super tight fight between this trio. Imagine if we add up Jona Zundling to this, we can have a lot of great sprint races across the whole season. And what was left was the men final, and the composition of it is quite similar to second semi-final with Lukas Shanava and 5 Norwegians. The only thing that changed is one Frenchman instead of one American, and the Norwegians just keep getting better and better because Kleibo was doing the first semi-final with Lukas Shanava. And speaking of Lukas Shanava, quite an interesting approach from him to that final, but understandable. So Luka is well known for quite high acceleration and top end speed, but he didn't want to play games in this one. He went to the front from the start, drive it super hard, and really only Kleibo was able to stick with him. He probably didn't think he was able to drop Kleibo, but he dropped the rest of Norwegian pack, and Kleibo just finished off the Frenchman on the final stretch. Not even the final stretch, he was so close exiting the final, penultimate hairpin, that on the final downhill with probably better skis, but also draft super important. They are going like 60k an hour. He was able to come from behind of Lukashenko van next to him, and in the last hairpin he was already fully in front of him, and then just final dig, and you can outpower Kleibo in good form on just a flat sprint. That's almost impossible. I mean, Federico Pellegrino last year in Davos begged to differ, but not today, not in front of his home crowd. Johannes Kleibo finishes second sprint win this season. It didn't start too well for him in Ruka, but he's back and he's in top shape. But Lukashenko also great performance, and definitely surprising third place for the World Cup leader Harald Esberg Amundsen, who was able to outperform your out-and-out sprinters like Taugbel and especially Valnes, who really had a not too good of a day today. I mean, he prefers, I think he prefers classic over freestyle. He seems to get quite better results in classic. Maybe he will be able to get some redemption on Sunday when it will be a 10k interval. If the course won't be too hard, it should really suit him. But coming back to Kleibo just for a second, after today he snatches away the red beep from Erik Valnes. Johannes is now leading the Sprinters World Cup, and in overall World Cup he jumps up to second place, although the gap to Amundsen is still quite significant, almost 70 points, and we would expect it to grow larger over following days. In Östersund, Kleibo has shown the sprint form is back. In the distance race, it wasn't looking that good. Certainly not as good as it was last year, even with the fact that 10k freestyle might not have been his best distance looking back into history. I mean, I would still expect him to do a little bit better than what he showed in Östersund last Sunday. And the plan for the next 2 days, for the rest of the weekend, is, as I said at the beginning, skiathlon tomorrow. I'm super hyped up for that race because we haven't seen skiathlon in World Cup for a long time. Last season, no skiathlon was planned at all. The only one we saw in Planica in World Cups, but that's not part of World Cup. And in World Cup itself, there was not a single skiathlon. 2 years ago, there were two planned, one in Lillehammer and one in Planica. Neither of them were actually realized. The Lillehammer race was replaced with, I believe, 10k run only. And the Planica was cancelled all in all due to COVID. So yeah, interesting to see skiathlon back in World Cup, and the end of the race weekend we have interval start in Classic. So that's a lot of racing in the upcoming days, even without ski classics in Italy. Don't forget about this. But if you like this episode, it would mean a lot for me to receive feedback from listener point of view. I would be interested in what you thought about today's competition. Also, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you're interested in future episodes of the podcast. For the remaining part of the weekend in Trondheim, there will be an episode both on Saturday and Sunday. But until then, goodbye, or since we're in Norway, ha det.